What the Buddha said about desire and what he did not. There is a quiet ache that moves beneath modern life. It hums beneath notifications, beneath ambition, beneath the careful smiles we offer one another. It is not always loud. Often it wears the face of success, comfort, even pleasure. Yet in still moments, late at night, or early before the world stirs, it reveals itself as a subtle dissatisfaction, a sense that something is always slightly unfinished. This ache is not a personal failure. It is not a flaw unique to this time. It is an ancient human experience, as old as wanting, as intimate as breath. The Buddha did not begin his teaching by condemning desire, nor by praising renunciation as an act of violence against the heart. He began by looking directly, gently, and without illusion at the texture of human longing. He observed how the mind reaches forward, again and again, believing fulfillment lies just beyond the present moment. He watched how we lean into the future, replay the past, and miss the fragile miracle of now in a world trained to crave more. More achievement, more certainty, more stimulation. The Buddha's voice does not shout. It does not command. It invites us to sit down, to listen, and to see clearly what desire actually does within us. This is not a talk about suppression. It is not a call to become cold, detached, or indifferent to life. And it is not a romantic rejection of the world. It is an exploration, intimate and honest, of what desire is, how it moves through us, and why misunderstanding it has cost us so much peace. Tonight, let us sit together by this inner fire. Let us listen not as students collecting ideas, but as human beings who have loved, lost, hoped, and grown tired of chasing shadows. Desire is often spoken of as the enemy, a word burdened with moral judgment, misunderstanding, and fear. Many believe the Buddha taught that desire itself is the root of all suffering, and that to walk his path one must extinguish all wanting, all longing, all joy. But this is not what he said, and more importantly, it is not what he lived. The Buddha was precise, almost surgical in how he spoke about the inner life. He did not use blunt instruments where clarity was needed. When he observed desire, he did not see a single monolithic force, but a spectrum of movements within the mind, some binding, some neutral, some even skillful. What he pointed to again and again was not desire as such, but clinging, not the arising of wanting, but the tightening around it. Not the wish itself, but the belief that our well-being depends on its fulfillment. Clinging as desire that has forgotten how to breathe. Consider how desire feels in the body when it becomes grasping. The chest narrows, the jaw tightens. The mind rehearses stories of if only and when I finally. We become less present, not more alive. This kind of desire does not open us to life. It contracts us. It makes the present moment feel like an obstacle rather than a home. The Buddha observed that much of human suffering is not caused by pain itself, but by resistance to pain. Not by pleasure ending, but by our refusal to let it end. We cling to youth as the body changes. We cling to certainty as the world shifts. We cling to identity as experience reshapes us. And here is the subtlety many miss. The Buddha did not say these experiences are wrong. He said they are impermanent, and that mistaking impermanence for something solid is where the wound deepens. In modern life, desire is constantly stimulated but rarely understood. We are taught to chase fulfillment through accumulation of objects, experiences, validation. Desire becomes externalized, commodified, and endlessly deferred. Satisfaction is always one purchase, one relationship, one breakthrough away. And so desire multiplies, but contentment does not. The Buddha saw this pattern long before advertising, before algorithms, before screens that glow through the night. He saw how the mind, left unexamined, runs on hunger, not because hunger is evil, but because awareness is absent. Desire itself is not the problem. unawareness is. When desire arises and is met with mindfulness, it reveals its true nature, a movement, a wave, a temporary formation. It comes, it stays, it dissolves. When we do not interfere, it teaches us. It shows us what we value, what we fear, what we believe will complete us. But when desire is unconscious, it hijacks the heart. It convinces us that happiness is conditional, that peace must be earned, proven, secured. The Buddha's insight was radical in its simplicity. Freedom does not come from getting what we want. It comes from understanding the wanting itself. This is why he did not advocate repression. Suppressed desire does not disappear. It hides, mutates, and returns with greater force. The forest monk does not cut down the tree of desire in anger. He studies its root. And those roots are subtle. They are woven from misunderstanding, from the illusion of permanence, from the habit of identifying with passing states as me and mine. When desire says, I must have this to be whole, it quietly asserts a self that is lacking, a self that needs completion, a self that stands apart from the flow of life. The Buddha did not affirm this self, nor did he deny experience. He pointed instead to a middle way, a way of seeing desire without becoming enslaved by it, of allowing joy without clinging, of engaging the world without being consumed by it. There is a kind of desire that leads to awakening, a longing for clarity, a wish to understand suffering and be free from it, a gentle aspiration to live with kindness and wisdom. This too is desire, but it does not bind, it loosens. The Buddha did not flatten the human experience into neutrality. He walked through villages, spoke with kings and outcasts, accepted food with gratitude, smiled, laughed, and taught with deep warmth. His renunciation was not a rejection of life. It was an intimacy with life unburdened by grasping. Modern ears often struggle with this nuance. We live in extremes, indulgence or denial, attachment or avoidance. But the Buddha's path was neither indulgent nor ascetic in spirit. It was attentive. Desire, when seen clearly, becomes a doorway. It shows us where the mind contracts. It reveals where we confuse intensity with fulfillment. And perhaps most importantly, it invites compassion, not judgment toward ourselves. Because every form of grasping is, at its core, a wish not to suffer. The Buddha did not shame this wish. He honored it and showed a wiser way. To understand what the Buddha said about desire, we must also look closely at what he did not say. And this silence is as instructive as his words. He did not say that life should be flattened into numbness. He did not teach the abandonment of beauty, relationship, or meaning. And he did not promise that freedom would come from rearranging the outer world until it finally behaves the way we want. What he questioned, gently but relentlessly, was the assumption that lasting peace can be extracted from conditions that are, by their nature, unstable. The modern mind often hears the word non-attachment and imagines distance, withdrawal, emotional coldness. But non-attachment, as the Buddha lived it, is not a severing of connection. It is intimacy without ownership, presence without possession. Consider how a child holds a butterfly. Too tight, and the wings are damaged. Too loose, and it flies away. Wisdom is not found in closing the hand, nor in refusing to reach at all, but in knowing how to hold without harm. The Buddha observed that suffering increases not when things change, but when we demand that they do not. Desire becomes suffering when it insists, when it argues with reality, when it refuses to bow to impermanence. This is why he spoke so often of seeing clearly. When we truly see impermanence, not as an idea, but as a lived truth, desire softens. It does not vanish, but it loosens its grip. Pleasure can be enjoyed without panic. Loss can be met without collapse. Success can be held without arrogance. Failure without self-annihilation. This clarity is not bleak. It is profoundly tender. In fact, when desire is no longer burdened by the demand to secure identity or permanence, it becomes lighter, more playful, more humane. We can want without desperation, love without possession, care without control. The Buddha did not say that relationships are traps. He did not say that ambition is sinful. He did not say that pleasure must be feared. What he pointed to was how we relate. A relationship held with clinging becomes a prison. A goal pursued with fixation becomes a burden. Pleasure grasped, that becomes anxiety in disguise. But the same experiences held with awareness can become teachers. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the Buddha's path. Freedom is not found by rejecting experience, but by changing our relationship to it. Desire that is examined becomes wisdom. Desire that is ignored becomes compulsion. The Buddha's practice was not one of blind faith, but of investigation. He invited people to look directly at their own experience, to notice how craving feels in the body, how it narrows attention, how it creates a subtle violence against the present moment. And he also invited them to notice something else. What happens when craving is not obeyed, not suppressed, not condemned, simply not followed. At first, there is discomfort, a sense of restlessness, a voice that says something is missing. But if one stays, breath by breath, another truth reveals itself. The wanting fades, the wave passes, and in its absence, there is space. Not emptiness, but ease. This is not theory. It is an experiment. The Buddha trusted human beings enough to let them see for themselves. In modern life, we are rarely given the chance to feel desire fully without acting on it. We are trained to respond immediately. Click, buy, scroll, speak, consume. Desire is accelerated, never digested, and so it becomes chronic. The Buddha's path slows the mind down enough to feel desire rather than be driven by it. This is not repression. It is intimacy. And intimacy requires courage, because beneath many of our desires lies fear. Fear of being unlovable, fear of insignificance, fear of loss, fear of death. The Buddha did not dismiss these fears. He saw them clearly, and he saw how desire often functions as a strategy to avoid them. We chase pleasure to avoid pain. We chase identity to avoid uncertainty. We chase control to avoid vulnerability. But avoidance does not free us. It tightens the knot. The Buddha's insight was that freedom comes not from outrunning fear, but from meeting it with awareness and compassion. When fear is met directly, without escape, it begins to dissolve, not because it is fought, but because it is understood. This is where desire transforms. When the mind no longer needs desire to shield it from fear, desire loses its compulsive edge. It becomes a movement of life rather than a demand for survival. The Buddha did not promise a life without longing. He offered a way to live without being owned by it. And this distinction matters deeply, because when people misunderstand the path, they often turn it into another project of self-improvement, another ideal to chase, another identity to perform. I should be less attached. I should want less. I should be more spiritual. But this too is desire wearing sacred clothing. The Buddha did not replace worldly craving with spiritual craving. He did not ask us to become someone else. He asked us to see clearly who we already are, moment by moment, without adding or subtracting. Awakening in his teaching is not an acquisition. It is a release from the belief that happiness is somewhere else, a release from the habit of arguing with what is, a release from the endless project of becoming. This does not make life smaller, it makes it vast. When desire is no longer fueled by lack, it becomes appreciation. Gratitude arises naturally. The simplest experiences, walking, breathing, listening, become complete in themselves. This is why the Buddha could sit beneath a tree with nothing and yet lack nothing. Not because he destroyed desire, but because he understood it. And understanding, when deep enough, sets the heart free. When desire is misunderstood, it pulls us endlessly forward. When it is understood, it brings us home. This is the quiet paradox at the heart of the Buddha's teaching. Not that desire must be eliminated, but that it must be known. And knowing in the deepest sense is not intellectual. It is embodied. It is intimate. It is patient. The Buddha did not sit beneath the Bodhi tree wrestling desire into submission. He sat unmoving long enough to see through it. He saw how desire arises dependent on conditions, a sound, a memory, a sensation, a thought. He saw how it borrows energy from attention. And he saw how, when attention is steady and non-reactive, desire cannot sustain itself. It fades, not because it is denied, but because it is no longer fed. This insight has profound implications for modern life. We often believe we are suffering because we want too much. But the Buddha would point elsewhere. We suffer because we believe our wants define us. We take passing impulses and build identities around them. This is who I am. This is what I need. Without this, I am incomplete. Desire becomes personal. And when desire becomes personal, it becomes heavy. The Buddha gently dismantled this burden by revealing something radical and unsettling. Desire is not who you are. It is an event, a process, a visit. When this is seen clearly, the grip loosens. The mind no longer needs to obey every urge, nor fight against it. Desire can be allowed to arise and pass, like weather moving through an open sky. This openness is not passive. It requires tremendous steadiness. To sit with desire without acting on it is to feel its heat, its urgency, its persuasive stories, and to remain still. This stillness is not indifference, it is strength. It is the strength to let experience unfold without interference. In a world addicted to movement, this kind of stillness is revolutionary. The Buddha understood that most of our actions are attempts to manage discomfort. Desire says, do something, change this, escape, and usually we listen. We distract ourselves, entertain ourselves, numb ourselves, or chase the next sensation. But the Buddha discovered something unexpected. When we stop running, discomfort does not destroy us. It teaches us. When desire is unmet and we stay present, we begin to see the layers beneath it. Restlessness softens into sadness. Sadness reveals loneliness. Loneliness opens into vulnerability. And within vulnerability, something astonishing appears. Not just compassion for others, but for oneself. This is one of the most overlooked dimensions of the Buddha's path. It is profoundly humane. It does not demand perfection. It does not scold the heart for wanting. It asks us to be honest. Honesty dissolves illusion. The Buddha did not say, do not love. He did not say, do not care. He said, in effect, see clearly how you love. See clearly how you care. Love entangled with clinging becomes fear. Care mixed with control becomes suffering. But love grounded in understanding becomes freedom. When desire is no longer fused with identity, relationships change. We no longer ask others to complete us. We no longer treat them as guarantees against impermanence. We can love deeply without demanding permanence from what is, by nature, changing. This does not make love weaker. It makes it honest. The Buddha's teaching on desire also touches ambition, creativity, and purpose, areas often misunderstood as incompatible with spiritual life. But the Buddha did not discourage effort. He discouraged compulsive striving. There is a difference. Compulsive striving is fueled by fear and comparison. It whispers, you are not enough yet. It turns life into a race with no finish line. Wholesome effort, on the other hand, is rooted in care. It arises from a wish to reduce suffering, one's own and others. It is steady, not frantic, patient, not desperate. The Buddha walked for years, teaching, listening, guiding, not because he needed to become someone, but because compassion naturally expresses itself in action. Desire purified by understanding becomes service. This is why awakening in the Buddha's path does not lead away from the world. It leads into it, but without illusion, without grasping, without fear. The awakened mind still experiences desire, hunger, fatigue, preference, intention, but these experiences no longer dominate the heart. They are known as movements, not command. Freedom is not the absence of desire. It is the absence of slavery. And this freedom is not reserved for monks, forests, or ancient times. It is available wherever awareness is practiced, in traffic, in conflict, in grief. Every moment of desire is an invitation. Not an invitation to indulge, not an invitation to suppress, an invitation to see, to notice how the body responds, to feel the tightening or loosening, to observe the stories the mind tells, to recognize the belief beneath the urge, and slowly, gently, the spell weakens. The Buddha did not promise instant liberation. He promised a path, walked step by step, breath by breath, where understanding grows naturally, like a tree rooted in patience. This path does not require withdrawal from life. It requires presence within it, and presence changes everything. When desire no longer drags the mind into the future, the present moment reveals its richness. Sounds become vivid. Simple acts regain dignity. Life is no longer something to conquer or escape. It is something to meet. The Buddha sat beneath a tree, not because he rejected the world, but because he finally stopped demanding that it be other than it was. In that stopping, freedom appeared, not as fireworks, not as ecstasy, but as peace that does not depend on condition, and once known, that peace cannot be forgotten. Desire will continue to arise. This is not a mistake. As long as there is life, there will be movement, of wanting, of leaning forward, of reaching toward what seems to promise relief or joy. The Buddha did not ask us to erase this movement. He asked us to understand it. When desire is seen clearly, it no longer has to be feared or obeyed. It becomes a teacher, showing us where the mind still grasps, where it still resists, where it still believes happiness lies elsewhere. And in seeing this, something softens. The heart loosens its armor. The present moment opens. Freedom in the Buddha's sense is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the ease of no longer being pushed and pulled by every inner demand. It is the relief of resting in what is, without argument. This understanding does not make life smaller or duller. It makes it honest. It allows us to love without possession, to act without compulsion, to enjoy without fear of loss. It returns dignity to simplicity and depth to ordinary moments. The path the Buddha offered is still here, not as a belief system, but as an invitation to look directly at our own experience with patience and kindness. No rituals are required in this moment. No special identity needs to be adopted. Only the willingness to pause, to feel, and to see. If these reflections have resonated with something quiet within you, let them stay. Let them unfold at their own pace. Understanding ripens in its own time. And if you wish to continue walking this path of clarity, compassion, and presence, you are welcome to return here. Follow this space and walk with us, step by mindful step, into a life less burdened by grasping and more rooted in peace. The fire is still warm, the night is still wide, and the path remains open.